now we're back. And the reason that I asked for that break was to make this easier so that it's not going to get drawn out in case it's over an hour. It doesn't get more confusing. You can break it into the two parts. All the dictionary definitions, and now I'm going to start reading, as I said, from page 842 of Book 2, Volume 7 of Ningen Kakume, the Human Revolution. President Keita writes, one who attempts to make an accurate appraisal of Josei Toda will find it difficult to draw an easy conclusion about the essence or prime point of his life. And this is the prime point chapter. True, he was an educator, but far removed from the stereotypical idea of a teacher. Although he managed several companies, he did not fit the category of an entrepreneur. A religious personality, yes, but far more than the average person of religion. He was a leader of the people. He was an extraordinary one at that. Deep within his existence lay an unrivaled originality, one above and beyond any categorization. People tend to attribute his creative faculty to his natural gifts or his character. It seems to me, however, that it is only when we ponder what caused such inborn qualities to manifest themselves to their fullest that we can approach the essence of Josei Toda. Originality is one quality that defies all attempts at imitation. It is the power to create something that has never been seen or heard of before, eclipsing any fashionable interpretation. True, any number of people have distinguishing traits, but people of true originality are rare. Even rarer are those creative people who actually achieve something noteworthy. Josei Toda had an originality that no one even began to emulate. The exact instance this distinguished power manifested itself was the unforgettable, sublime moment that Toda experienced in prison. That mystic experience that we've already read about from me reading earlier, right? That moment drew a line between the earlier and later halves of Toda's life. He realized he was a Buddha. That's what that was all about. When the eye of his mind was opened after his careful and attentive study of the Lotus Sutra. In his lifetime, Toda would relate that experience over and over again and still be unable to express himself to his satisfaction. It must have been an indescribably mystic state of life during which he realized his true mission. One must remember that this mystic experience in no way resulted from a mere superficial reading of Shakyamuni's 28th chapter Lotus Sutra. True, this study played an important role, but nothing more. Toda read between the lines of the Lotus Sutra, passages of Nichiren Daishonen's The Record of the Orally Transmitted Teachings. He hurled his entire being into his most difficult yet most accurate explanation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Into this most difficult yet accurate explanation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and thereby obtained access to the depths of his life, of this life philosophy. This, I believe, is the exact essence of his enlightenment. Let me read that again. One must remember that this mystic experience that Josei Toda had in prison was in no way the result of a mere superficial reading of Shakyamuni's 28th chapter Lotus Sutra. If you remember, he got to that point of the 34 negations, and he said, I'm not going to go on any further until I figure this part out. Do you remember how he attacked it? He'd already read it several times. But this time he got to that part he couldn't understand, and he didn't stop. And that's what led to that experience. Okay, remember? Right? One must remember that this mystic experience in no way resulted from a mere superficial reading of Shakyamuni's 28th chapter Lotus Sutra. As it would be, frankly, if any one of the people that are listening to me right now picked up or went to www.nichirenlibrary.org, and in there's the Burton Watson's translation of the 28th chapter Lotus Sutra, and you could just read that right through. It would be about that superficial. There's no way. Okay? So it's available to you. You will find that exactly what he's describing here will occur to you as well. In maybe a different way. Maybe you won't manifest some mystic experience, but there will be a transitional point in your life where you'll understand things in a little bit differently than you have up until that moment. And you'll never be able to understand them any differently than you have after that moment. True, this study played an important role because it's what you have to do to get there, but nothing more. Toda read between the lines of the Lotus Sutra, passages of Nichiren Daishonin's The Record of the Orally Transmitted Teachings. So he got the understanding of the Daishonin's perspective of the Lotus Sutra and read the Lotus Sutra from that perspective rather than a superficial reading of just the words expressed in a translation. He hurled his entire being into this most difficult yet most accurate explanation of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and thereby obtained access to the depths of this life philosophy. This, I believe, is the exact essence of his enlightenment. The unwavering opening of the eye of Toda's mind came as a final settlement of accounts for the earlier half of his life. Pardon me. A life filled with distress and suffering. His vision, now without the slightest blur, overflowed with life and vitality, clearly reflecting his awareness of his mission for the latter half of his life. This enlightenment led to unbounded delight and provided him with an entirely new perspective. The path that lay ahead of him was that of Kosen Rufu, an unparalleled undertaking in the history of humankind. Moreover, his mystic experience embodied the highest principle of salvation befitting modern society. Immediately after his release from prison, Toda made every effort to share the enlightenment he had gained amid the bitterness of prison life. It was no accident that the reconstruction of the Soka Gakkai began with Toda's lecture on the Lotus Sutra to a group of 4 people. To impart to others the depth of awareness he had experienced was impossible except through the medium of the Lotus Sutra. Toda's earnest lectures on this sutra continued through their first and second phases, but would soon be suspended because of his business failure. All right? In his lectures, Toda tried to explain to his audience the mystic experience of his own enlightenment through the intermediary of the Lotus Sutra. As the series advanced, the still limited capability of the participants caused the pure tone of his theories to give way little by little to an interpretation of his experience, borrowing examples from the Tendai school, and consequently taking on a stronger flavor of that school. As a result, his business suffered a tormenting setback as though paralleling the undesirable direction his lectures were taking. And that paragraph is why I'm reading you this whole chapter. Okay? Because the thing you got to understand is this is not about getting your head wrapped around the Lotus Sutra. Okay? And a lot of people are going to think that it is. And President Toda is going to talk about the Lotus Sutra like that's all that in a bag of chips. Okay? And it is, as a supportive perspective and documentation to the eternal teachings of the Buddhism Sewing and Nichiren's Gosho. Okay? And that's why I wanted to do this. I want to read this because I wanted you to hear President Ikeda saying, President Toda screwed up. And he caught himself with that screw up, and he corrected himself on that screw up. And it's his self-correction and understanding that I'm now reporting to you. Okay? We can never dilute the Daishonin's teachings with mind candy bullshit that has nothing to do with the strictness of those teachings. We're not allowed to reinterpret them. We can make distinctions. That's why we all occur at different times with different associations. But we can't change the teaching. And Tentai is a theoretical perspective. And we cannot represent a theoretical perspective as an actualized reality of what we're talking about. And if you lead people to believe that, then they're going to keep reading books trying to find Buddhahood. And they'll never find Buddhahood there. And you will have committed a great slander in making them feel that they could find it there. And that's why I wanted to read this chapter. So we just got to this, so I can stop now. No. Let me just read this paragraph again. In his lectures, Toda tried to explain to his audience. This is just out of him trying to explain what he had experienced. Toda tried to explain to his audience the mystic experience of his own enlightenment through the intermediary of the Lotus Sutra. It's like, don't take my word for it. The Lotus Sutra says the same kind of stuff, da-da-da. As the series advanced, the still limited capability of the participants caused the pure tone of his theories to give way little by little to an interpretation of his experience. An interpretation, bringing it down into something people could understand. Borrowing examples from the Tendai school. And then, consequently, because of having to borrow those examples, taking on a stronger flavor of that school. As a result, his business suffered a tormenting setback as though paralleling the undesirable direction that his lectures were taking. This failure, however, forced Toda to read the Lotus Sutra with more determination and even clearer insight. And frankly speaking, that's exactly what happened to me. I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year personally, frankly speaking. Okay? When that all went away, very unexpectedly, I had to figure out what I had been doing wrong because I thought I'd been getting so much benefit. I must be doing everything right. It's only because of President Toda's experience that I wasn't worried or destroyed by a very destructive personal experience in my life. It was only because I'd already, okay, if it happened to Toda, I gotta say, okay, it isn't like it's only me, and I've got to now find out, just like he did, what is going on, really, because I don't deserve this, Gohan-san. I serve you every freaking day for 20, 25, going on 30 years now. Well, why, I gotta lose everything? Oh, I'm so pissed off. But to change that out for Buddhahood, made it all back anyhow? No problem. This is exactly what Toda. I can tell you from my own personal experience, never begrudge your life. You cannot begrudge your life. When you think you're begrudging your life, you're really just creating fortune that's going to overwhelm you to the point that you'll be crying every day. Just can't even think about it without going to tears. So, let me continue. Let me go. This failure, however, faced Toda to read the Lotus Sutra with more determination. My wife's looking at me because she's lived through this with me. And you know I love you very much. You know that, right? And I say, and I'm not nice, because I'm not nice. And you know me well enough to know I'm not nice. This failure, however, forced Toda to read the Lotus Sutra with more determination and even clearer insight. Now, with more determination and even clearer insight. So again, this is dude that's already lecturing and lecturing and lecturing and creating the goddamn Soka Gakkai. And then he's more determination, more clearer insight. This just tells you, okay?
We should do the same.
But it also tells you have no limitations. Yes. And the only limitation you'll ever get is when you think you got it all.
Yes.
When you already got it figured out, you don't got to do any more to get this determination. You don't need more determination. You don't need clearer insight. Go read The Human Revolution and see how the people that actually led this made it happen.
Yes.
Okay? That's why we're considered fanatics. Because you got to be really
devoted.
Do not begrudge your life. Okay. His explanation of Buddhist philosophy became purer and was more easily understandable, yet brilliant and full of confidence. This was evident in every lecture after his inauguration as president in 1951. So he squared all this away, folks. I want to let you know about that. Whenever he found himself deviating from even the slightest from the correct path, Toda would always return to his own starting point, his mystic experience of enlightenment, and start anew. By this time, and I encourage all of you, that was just written for us to all have that, to know. If that's what we have to do, we have to keep going back to the prime point. We will find ourselves at those same points where we have to make the discerning reality check. Am I drifting? Am I straight on? Okay, that's why these sentences are here. This isn't to tell you about Josei Toda. You are Josei Toda. That's the point. Whenever he found himself deviating the slightest from the correct path, Toda would always return to his own starting point, his mystic experience of enlightenment, and start anew. In front of the Gohonzans where you start. Yes. By this time, he had discontinued chapter by chapter explanations of the Lotus Sutra and confined his Class A lecture to the 2 cardinal chapters, expedient means and lifespan. He also selected newly converted people for his audience. This seemed to be like a wild plan, since lectures on Buddhist scriptures are considered extremely difficult to understand, even for experienced members, let alone beginners. Toda had the courage to undertake this almost impossible task. He would not digress even for an instant from the enlightenment he had grasped during that sublime moment in prison, after reading the Lotus Sutra with his entire being based on the mystic law. He wanted new believers to share fully his ultimate realization at the very first stages of their practice, like I was able to, because he wrote what he wrote in Lectures on the Sutras. If he hadn't been so straightforward, I would have never caught the fire. Nobody had to teach me, because Josei Toda, I read. I didn't have leaders talk like Josei Toda's writing Lectures on the Sutra. There was nobody talking like that. There was certainly nothing being translated by President Keita that was written like that. The closest thing I can find now is this. Okay, so again, the way he explained it is he ignites the fuse of faith. And then it's your personal connection to the Gohonzon that's the thing that takes you there. That's the only thing that's going to take you there anyhow. You've made the causes to become the Buddha in your present form. Nobody else. The source of Toda's originality lay in the uniqueness of his awakening, which was in itself the highest principle of salvation. In this modern age, few people, if any, have expounded such a specific theory for saving the world and then made it the cornerstone of their own lives. Such was the enormous value of Josei Toda, one man whose existence glorified the century. After taking office as president, Toda gave his Class A lecture once a week at the headquarters in Kanda. The size of his audience continued to grow so rapidly that the two second-floor rooms, not larger than 13 tatami mats, soon became too small to accommodate all of the students. Many now had to stand on the stairs. He began to use the education hall, but it was not long before this building also proved insufficient. By autumn of 1953, just a couple months before I was born, the lectures were being given in the newly completed Tashima Public Hall in Ikebukuro. Ikebukuro. When full, the auditorium would accommodate more than 2,000 people. On the first evening at this public hall, Toda seated himself in the chair behind the table on the stage and cleared his throat lightly. Aside from the microphone and the pitcher of water, there was nothing on the table, not even a book or a notebook. He did all this straight out of his head. He looked the picture of health as he smiled at the huge gathering. He was as cheerful as he could be, overflowing with joy at explaining the almost unexplainable. Without any preliminaries, he plunged directly into the heart of his lecture. There is unquestionably, and this is the other reason I'm reading this chapter tonight, because you got to understand this is the most important thing to understand. If you chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, you're a disciple of Nichiren Daishonin. You're not a disciple of Shakyamuni Buddha.
I don't.
I mean, I really think everybody that's listening to this understands that,
yes.
But you do understand that's the deal, right?
Right.
Okay? This isn't about Shakyamuni.
No, I don't.
Okay. Just want to make sure everybody understands that, because Buddhism sewing, we transition the perception of the sutras as they're written to qualify that point. Okay? There is unquestionably a distinct difference between the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin and that of Shakyamuni. Toda fervently impressed the Buddhism of the latter day of the law on the minds of the new believers who had previously associated this religion only with Shakyamuni. Even intellectuals of our time sometimes seek salvation in Buddhism, but only within the confines of the conventional teachings of Shakyamuni. They dare not adopt the correct Buddhism of the latter day of the law. Indeed, they go so far as to doubt its validity. By outlining Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism at the outset of his lecture, Toda was actually refuting, which is what we do with Gongyo. We don't do Gongyo every day to praise the Lotus Sutra. We refute it. That's what Gongyo is. That's a refutation of those 2 chapters that we read in Gongyo. You all understand that, right? I'll read that to you from the OTT. Not now, but next week. By outlining Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism at the outset of his lecture, Toda was actually refuting the misconception of contemporary intelligentsia, contempt or disregard of the one religion that can save the modern world. What then is the difference? Toda asked. Well, the record of the orally transmitted teachings provides the most definite answer to this question. So it is essential that we study the passages of this document. Open your Gosho to page 752, and they were doing their version. The majority of the participants did not yet have the Gosho, and those few who had brought it were annoyingly slow in finding the designated passage. Slowly, Toda watched all this. The Gosho is an expensive book. Perhaps many of you cannot afford it now, but once you purchase a copy, it will be yours for life. Law books change from time to time, but the Gosho? Never. So try to get a copy as soon as possible, even though you may have to live with a thin purse for a while. What nerve to attempt to study What nerve to attempt the study of Nichiren Buddhism without so much as buying a Gosho? You are like a samurai without a sword. The audience, and of course he's joking. He knows they're all poor. He's not giving them a hard time. He's just saying it. This is good-heartedly. The audience burst into laughter, and a relaxed atmosphere filled the large hall. Standing beside Toda, Tame Izumida read passages from the record of the orally transmitted teachings in a penetrating voice. Toda sat motionless in his seat, listening. First, concerning the 16th or lifespan of the Thus Come One chapter of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the 9th volume of words and phrases of Lotus Sutra states, that would be Tentais, as follows. Thus Come One, and that's at the very beginning of the 16th chapter of the OTT. Thus Come One, you'll recognize these sentences, although it's not the same translation. This hadn't been translated yet when this was written. Thus Come One, I shouldn't say this. Maybe a bridged version this does. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Okay, Thus Come One is a general term for all the Buddhas in the universe and throughout the 3 existences of life. Buddhas in their true identity or their manifestation. Specifically, it is another name of the 3 bodies of the original Buddha. Lifespan means to fathom the benefits of all the Buddhas in the universe and throughout the 3 existences of life. Buddhas in their true entity or in their manifestation, and the 3 Buddhas with their respective bodies. Hence the name of the Lifespan chapter. That's from the Gosho Zenchu, page 752. Let me read it again. First, concerning the 16th or the lifespan of the Thus Come One. And if you want to read this more clearly, it's just go to chapter 16 of the OTT. The 9th volume of Words and Phrases of the Lotus Sutra states as follows. Thus Come One is a general term for all Buddhas in the universe and throughout the 3 existences of life. So all Buddhas that have ever existed or will exist. Buddhas in Buddhas in their true entity or in their manifestation. Specifically, it is another name for the 3 bodies of the original Buddha, which is life itself. Lifespan means to fathom the benefits of all the Buddhas in the universe and throughout the 3 existences of life. Buddhas in their true entity or in their manifestation, and the 3 Buddhas with their respective bodies. Hence the name of the Lifespan chapter. Okay? Nichiren Daishonin comments on this. The title of this chapter represents an essential principle applicable to Nichiren. This was transferred to Bodhisattva Superior Practices in the Supernatural Powers chapter. The thus come one in the broad sense means Shakyamuni and all the Buddhas in the universe and throughout the 3 enlightened bodies. But in its strict sense, okay, so profound meanings doesn't go this far. This is the Daishonin reinterpreting this for the disciples in the latter day. But in its strictest sense, which is not present in the previous explanation that I just read, but in its strict sense, it means only the true Buddha who possesses the 3 enlightened bodies. Now I, Nichiren, and my followers meaning that's all of us that are bodhisattvas of the earth, meaning to say that thus come one in its broadest sense indicates humankind. But in a stricter sense, it stands for my disciples and believers, because we're the only ones chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, and that's the only thing that actualizes this from the theoretical to the actual. Okay? So he's not chastising people, you're not good enough or anything else. It's what karma are you manifesting? It's only myself and my believers that chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. No one else chants Nam-myoho Renge Kyo that's not a disciple of Nichiren. It's Nichiren's thing, right? You with me? You follow what I'm saying? Okay. Therefore, the original Buddha with the three enlightened bodies is the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law. The honorific title of the original Buddha with the three bodies, with these three enlightened bodies, is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. This forms the basis of the three important matters expounded in Lifespan chapter. Did you follow what that just said? Nichiren Daishonin comments on this. The title of this chapter represents an essential principle applicable to Nichiren. This was transferred to Bodhisattva superior practices applicable to Nichiren. So when he's talking about the original teacher, he's already saying this is applicable to me. He's already said that in the very first sentence. This was transferred to Bodhisattva superior practices in the supernatural powers chapter. Thus come one in the broad sense, being Shakyamuni and all the Buddhas of the universe and throughout the three enlightened bodies. But in its strict sense, it means only the true Buddha who possesses the three enlightened bodies. Now, I and my followers mean to say that thus come one in its broadest sense indicates all humankind, but in a stricter sense, it stands for my disciples and believers. Therefore, the original Buddha with the three enlightened bodies is the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law. Are you a votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law? Yes. Are you a Nam-myoho Renge Kyo thus come one then? Yes. Is there any separation or difference between you and Nichiren? No. Is there any difference between you and Nichiren and what is attained? No. That's the point. You're the same Buddha as Nichiren Daishonin, period. All right? The honorific title of the original Buddha with the three enlightened bodies is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. We're Nam-myoho Renge Kyo thus come ones. This forms the basis of the three important matters expounded in the Lifespan chapter. The participants appeared perplexed, confronted from the very beginning with the profoundest... He opens the lecture by saying the most difficult thing to understand. The participants appeared perplexed, confronted from the very beginning with the profoundest of all tenets in Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. They were unable to make head or tail of it. Toda perceived the confusion of his audience. So if any of you were confused by me rereading that 3 times, don't feel bad. This is a truly mystic revelation, Toda says, looking at their perplexed faces. He said with an unperturbed tone, as if he thought it quite natural that the participants should be struggling to understand. Their uneasy feeling dispelled, the listeners now focused on Toda. You have just heard several lines from the record of the orally transmitted teachings, Toda continued. Since then, countless interpretations have been made of the Lotus Sutra. Nisho Hondo, Tokuna Oda, Ichiro Kobayashi, and many other scholars have written volumes on this sutra. Alas, all such documents are mere scraps of paper, for they are not based on the record of the orally transmitted teachings. I myself suffered bitterly because I made a similar mistake. He's going back talking about I used, Tentai to try and explain rather than going to the Daishonin's teachings. I missed the point myself. I had a bitter result. I suffered bitterly because I made a similar mistake. So he's telling them, there'll be a repercussion if you don't get what I'm saying and get it down right. And it's not a repercussion. The only reason I can express it is because I already got the same repercussion. It isn't because I knew better, I'm better than you. In fact, the reason I got the repercussion, I think, is probably so I could tell you. so I could warn you. I already volunteered to get it in advance of you to give you an opportunity not to experience it, so that you could have faith in what I'm saying based on my experience. Okay? Understand, that's what a teacher's always trying to do, is trying to help you expedite the process by not making you go through the same freaking steps they had to go through to get every single little thing they got. Is to give it to you. You don't have to do anything but listen and understand and believe in what they say and then do it, and you'll see the proof. Alas, all such documents are mere scraps of paper, for they are not based on the record of the orally transmitted teachings. I myself suffered bitterly because I made a similar mistake. All of these works were prepared in the style of Tentai. Should you ever admire these works, you will be committing an unforgivable error of outwardly remaining a believer in Nichiren Buddhism while inwardly degrading yourself to the position of a follower of Tentai. Whoa, I think I needed to read that to you. This is what President Toda said when he said, don't ever mix up the basis of perception. I myself suffered bitterly because I made a similar mistake. All of these works were prepared in the style of Tentai. Should you ever admire these works, because mind candy is easy to admire, you would be committing an unforgivable error of outwardly remaining a believer in Nichiren Buddhism while inwardly degrading yourself to a position of a follower of Tentai. Mark. This applies to every activity in which people of faith are engaged. Mark. For this reason, Nico Shonin, founder of the Head Temple, warns us against studying Tentai's teachings until we completely understand the Gosho. His 26th admonition states in part, Article 10, unless you have a thorough understanding of and firm faith in the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin, you should not study Tentai's doctrines. Article 2, followers of the school should engrave the teachings of the Gosho in their lives and thereby inherit the ultimate principles expounded by the master, Nichiren. Then, if they have any leisure time, they should inquire into the doctrine of the Tentai school. He says that only after we become perfectly versed in the Gosho should we study Tentai's theory. To me, that means you never do. There's no reason to. There's really no reason to. It takes long enough to get your head wrapped around correctly what the Daishonen's saying, for God's sake. He says that only after we become perfectly versed in the Gosho should we study Tentai's theory. And this only as time permits. So you should not be engrossed in Tentai's works. I suffered a humiliating failure because I lost myself in studying them, President Toda is saying. Now I have had enough of them. On second thought, I do not think I need to worry about you too much, because even if you were ordered to study them, you would have neither the ability nor the time. If someone asks you why you do not study them, answer in a dignified manner, because Mr. Toda ordered me not to. That will shut their mouth for good. Again, the audience erupted in laughter. Every heart had begun to warm with pleasure, with the pleasure of listening to Toda's confident words. He continued to speak as if talking to each individual. I got just a little more, we'll stop. If you sincerely wish to study the Lotus Sutra, you must read 106 comparisons and On the True Cause, along with the record of the orally transmitted teachings. Though I am an unworthy disciple of the true Buddha, I lecture on the Lotus Sutra exactly as I view it from the standpoint of Nichiren Daishonen's Buddhism, which no one else ever did. You may feel I exaggerate, but think seriously. Who in the modern age can explain the passages of the Lotus Sutra without a single mistake? I can do it. The audience shook with a storm of applause. Toda gave a sincere, humble look, his lips firmly and solemnly set. He knew he was saying some pretty serious shit. Okay? And he knew he better not be wrong. Okay? But he was completely confident. Completely confident. I would not mislead you. I would not take you down this path if I wasn't absolutely sure I'm not making this up. Okay? But I want to point this out. At the beginning of this paragraph on page 848, if you sincerely wish to study the Lotus Sutra, not the Gosho, if you sincerely wish to study the Lotus Sutra, you must first read 106 comparisons, which we don't have access to, and On the True Cause, which we don't have access to in English. Okay? Along with the record of the orally transmitted teachings, which we do, which is really, I think, really all you need if you have faith. Through it, though I am an unworthy disciple of the true Buddha, I lecture on the Lotus Sutra exactly as I view it from the standpoint of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, which no one else ever did. You may feel I exaggerate, but I think seriously, who in this modern age can explain the passages of the Lotus Sutra without a single mistake? I can do it. The auditorium shook with a storm of applause. Toda gave a sincere, humble look, his lips firmly and solemnly set. His conviction stemmed from his awareness of his mission. We are now going to study the expedient means and lifespan chapters. I ask you to remember always that the essence of the Daishonin's lecture lies in this portion, lifespan of the Thus Come One chapter of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which I keep going back to, which is what I read, right? You're a Buddha once you come to the Buddha. Okay, that's what that whole thing is saying there. Why did the Daishonin take the trouble of adding, he said, why did the Daishonin take the trouble of adding Nam to the original title, which reads Lifespan of the Thus Come One chapter of Myoho Renge-kyo? Okay, Nichiren changed that title. Remember, I talked about that when we read this. Remember, the title was changed automatically. Okay, so why did Nichiren do that? Because by doing so, the Daishonin is telling us that this is the most important part of his teaching, the Daishonin's teachings. When Nam is included, Thus Come One indicates Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Thus Come One. That is the Buddha hidden between the lines of the lifespan chapter, life itself. Without Nam, Thus Come One means only the Buddha on the level of Shakyamuni's Buddhism. It is now clear that the Daishonin's idea of Thus Come One is entirely different from that of Shakyamuni. Thus, the mere addition of this short prefix Nam causes a revolutionary change in the concept of Thus Come One. Thus Come One as some supernatural, otherworldly entity that we have to go to a Buddha land to encounter, to all this time we didn't realize we had the gem in our top knot. It was sewn in our robe. We're the prodigal son. We're already that Thus Come One. All right? You may think it troublesome to distinguish between the two kinds of Thus Come Ones. But this trouble is worth taking because only then can you reach the exact truth of Buddhist philosophy, which isn't actually revealed until we get to the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin and the Buddhism of Soen. I just added that last part, but that's the reason. Because only then can you reach the exact truth of Buddhist philosophy. Once you accurately grasp that essence, you will be able to absorb the whole of the Daishonin's teachings in one broad, unobstructed view. Since lifespan means to measure the benefits of the Buddhas, lifespan of the Thus Come One chapter of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the 16th as it's described in the OTT, indicates the benefits. Since lifespan means to measure the benefits of the Buddhas, lifespan of the Thus Come One chapter of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo indicates the benefits of the original Buddha, to whom reference is made between the lines of the lifespan chapter. If you read the expedient means and lifespan chapters in this light, you will begin to understand as clear as day the invaluable principle these chapters hold. All people, no matter what erroneous schools they may belong, would recognize the distinct difference between the Daishonin's Buddhism and that of Shakyamuni if they would only study the record of the orally transmitted teachings with all earnestness and sincerity. In actuality, however, they fail to sense this difference. Why? Because they don't have the Gohonzon. You can't get access to this without the Gohonzon. Why? Because they do not have the Gohonzon. Thus, the addition of Nam to the original title produces a diametrical difference between Nichiren Buddhism and other schools. Explaining every word and phrase in simple language, Toda was now approaching his conclusion. The record of the orally transmitted teachings continues. Therefore, the original Buddha with the 3 enlightened bodies is the votary of the Lotus Sutra of the latter day of the law. This is the most crucial point. The true Buddha can be identified as human life itself, an entity that is no one's creation. Nichiren Daishonin asserts that the true Buddha manifests himself as the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day, just as each one of us do. The Daishonin is clearly referring to himself in this phrase, a definite statement that is beyond all ambiguity. The record of the orally transmitted teachings further states the honorific title of the original Buddha with the 3 enlightened bodies is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This passage exactly fits with the foregoing phrase, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. This thus come one is no one else but Nichiren Daishonin himself. As the record of the orally transmitted teachings teaches, this forms the basis of the 3 important matters expounded in the Lifespan chapter. So, during my lecture, always bear in mind that thus come one, as used in the title of the Lifespan chapter, indicates the Buddha expounded between the lines of the Lifespan chapter. That is the original Buddha, or Nichiren Daishonin himself. So that's what you got to understand. Toda paused for a sip of water, then immediately embarked on his explanation of the Expedient Means chapter, and that's where we will probably back up a little bit and then go again when we see each other again next time. So that'll be it for tonight. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the live stream people that came and joined us tonight. I can't tell because I can't see the back of the camera. And for YouTubers, thank you for always being there. Joe, Jackie, everybody, talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.